Hello, everyone, on this fine evening, and welcome to the No Man's Podcast, the podcast presented by the students of S.H.I.E.L.D., where we read Catwoman issues. But really, we're covering No Man's Land, the giant Batman epic at the turn of the century. And this episode, we are talking about Catwoman issues. The story arc is called The Mission, and it's Catwoman 72 through 74. Same creative team on every issue. So the writing here is by John Ostrander and the art by Jim Ballant. And our fine viewers may recall that the last Catwoman issue we read was 57. So we're jumping all the way here to 72. And we will now read in a row. Well, not in a row. It will be split up over episodes. Maybe only one more, probably only just one more episode. But we will read 72 through 77 directly tying it. And last time we read Catwoman, we remarked on Devin Grayson writing it. And her run on Catwoman literally ended last issue. So we snuck in some notes on her when we did that, or probably before on Batman-related stuff. And I do want to note, for the anal people out there like myself, that Selina was actually in Gotham City from issues 58 through 65, but they're not officially tie-ins. I haven't read them. I know my co-hosts definitely have not. So I can't say to what extent it really bounces off of or plays on the fact that it's in the post-Cataclysm status quo. And then after that, she moves to Manhattan for an arc, which we will have referenced here. But for what we did miss, and probably not going to go back to unless I get really bored or something way after the fact, we missed an arc with Scarecrow, Joker, the Flash villain Trickster, and the kind of obscure DC espionage character Nemesis. And now this is as I said, Devin Grayson is over. This is the first issue by John Ostrander, who's literally just here for the entire stretch that ties back into No Man's Land. And then he's gone. And the next run is by another woman similar to Devin Grayson, and it's a female character named Bronwyn Carlton, who I don't think she wrote much else. I think she came from editorial or something, but very unique name, Bronwyn. And then there's a finale arc by John Francis Moore. But none of that matters because this chunk that we're reading right now, and not even the stuff that we're also going to read later on, these are the final issues by Jim Ballant. And if you factor in like the zero issue and annuals and stuff like that, not exactly in a row, they were like one or two fill-ins, but he did 79 total issues of Catwoman in a run, which is pretty damn impressive. In my book, for sure, especially by this point. I mean, this is well beyond, your Kirby's and Buscema's who were doing that. And as far as his background, I probably said some of this before, but he's a Kubert grad, and this Catwoman book was actually his first ongoing gig. And less than a year into him drawing Catwoman and that book existing, he draws her on the cover of Wizard number 33, and then shortly thereafter, like a year later, on Wizard number 48. So this Catwoman book was like kind of a big deal, and really the primary big two figure in the bad girl trend, which starts in like the mid 90s. It starts pushing aside the initial image and speculation hype, where Spawn and Savage Dragon and Youngblood kind of cooled down a little bit, and you have the rise of Catwoman, and then she's alongside characters like Lady Death and Vampirella, Witchblade, Angela, She, Glory, and other ones. And literally after these issues that we read, Jim Ballant goes into self-publishing through his company Broadsword Comics with this character Tarot, Witch of the Black Rose. And besides like the occasional variant and special fill-in appearance and stuff like that, that's what he does to this day. And similar to his crazy, impressive run on Catwoman, he has written and drawn 119 issues of Tarot, Witch of the Black Rose. No renumbering, nothing like that. Which on our like weekly show when Spawn 300 came out, we were hyping that up and everything like that. So, Tarot Witch the Black Rose, number 119, that's pretty much unparalleled besides Eric Larson on Savage Dragon, who had a head start of several, like 8 years on. So that's the background on Catwoman, and now we'll actually talk about the comic books.
That was your big intro? I expected you to show off like some sort of giant Jim Balent collection.
No, not really. I mean, I never like was that familiar with this series. I mean, I knew about it obviously back in the day, but the Ed Brubaker run and that volume of Catwoman, which eventually follows this, is like so critically acclaimed that I feel like this volume, even though it's like 90 issues, like in the public consciousness, I feel like it was swept aside pretty quickly. Like no one really talked about it. Well, and that's probably part of it, especially if you were compared to the different style of comics of the latter era with Brubaker. But eventually, I'll probably get. DC has been putting out like thick paperbacks, collecting like 12 to 15 issues of this run. I think I'm just gonna get the first because then it's like every other arc is tying into crossover events. So I don't really care.
All right.
But yeah.
All right. Cat volume number 72. We already said this was by John Ostrander, Jim Balent, so that's the last time you're probably going to hear their names for this unless we do it all for every issue. But we open up with this giant splash page of Catwoman hanging from a rope, trying to steal this gem diamond of a cat. And it's revealed that it's not really a giant diamond, but it is a Oracle like kind of hologram communicator thing, which I'm reminded that Oracle had a logo. It's like this bald head, this green bald head with then like giant bunch of jagged lines going on around it. I forgot that Oracle had a logo, but it's her logo, and she's giving a kind of message to Catwoman, being like, "Hey, Batman needs your help to go steal this thing. You got to get back into Gotham so we can talk to you." And she agrees to it, and we get this giant sequence of her trying to sneak back into Gotham. She's been in Manhattan at this point, by the way, and so we get her whipping onto a helicopter, and then also we get these segues to like these three goons that are messing around with some explosives. So she managed to get in the helicopter all the way to the bridge, and then she kind of jumps on a boat, and from there's a giant explosion with the goons. She's in the water on like a little not jet ski, like one of those little things you hold on to, and it just like skimmers through the water. And I think and then she's able to swim to shore and pull herself in, and she's able to get acquainted with the current grounds of No Man's Land from just things she's overhearing while she's kind of scaling some buildings, and she eventually meets up with Batman, who then says, "Hey, I need you to go to New York to get these data discs for me." And she laughs it off because she's like, "I just came all the way to Manhattan, but the lines needed to be secure because these discs hold some solution to save Gotham." And Batman gets her to do it by just kind of grabbing her and kissing her and playing to that aspect of their relationship, and then she agrees to do it that way, which I think is very, very odd and has not aged well at all. But Batman leads her to a way back out of the city is through these tunnels in the sewer that are abandoned, and this is where those goons were messing around with explosives still, and Catwoman runs into them, and there's the shooting that managed to explode everything once again, and now the tunnels are flooding with water. And how are they going to get out? I have no idea. And that's Catwoman 72. I'll point out that Jim Balent's art here is fine, but I think his art gets worse every single issue.
I feel like it was better those 15 issues ago when we read that arc. Also, I kind of had this weird thought while reading this stuff, and I don't know if this is straight up conspiracy theory, but you guys can let me know if you think there may be some credence to it. I feel like writing under Devin Grayson, maybe he was like a little bit less prone to cheesecake, and maybe now maybe now that he knows Devin Grayson's gone and it's John Ostrander, this balded guy in his 50s or whatever, he can lean a little bit more into that. Or maybe it's just as his career went on and on, he leaned more into cheesecake. It could be either. It could be a mix.
It could be. I will say, though, that the immediate feel of John Ostrander's had here as when we're going with these these thug guys, the heavy wet work military aspect is all over it, which is kind of a John Ostrander signature. He's very kind of military-esque with his stories and like the teams he's written. Like Suicide Squad has that aspect to it, for example. So yeah, immediately I'm like, yeah, this is a John Ostrander written comic book, and it's especially more so as it goes on.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of fun flavor here. There's some quick dialogue about Nightfall, and then there's also Nightfall and the revolving door Robins. Because obviously people don't know goons on the street and citizens don't know Dick Grayson versus Jason Todd versus Tim Drake. So they're like, Robin was, a grown man and suddenly he's an 11-year-old again. That's fucking weird.
There's also like a weird Frederick Wortham bashing in here.
Yeah, but it's done in a weird way where it's like it made me think like how many other Batman comics, if ever, have like made those like Frederick Wortham jokes. And what we're specifically referring to is like that like innuendo, which comes from like Wortham and that type kind of era, but is, repeated by every edgy 12-year-old, like the idea that Batman sleeps with Robin, stuff like that. And that's referenced here. And it's obviously this is a Catwoman book, but super strange to make a joke about that in a Batman title.
Also, a lot of use of the word retarded.
That didn't really stand out to me, but I'm sure it's there.
It's not the correct term anymore. That's all I'm saying.
There's at least one.
Yeah, I mean, I liked this issue. It kind of shows Catwoman as like pretty damn capable and badass, especially as she gets into Gotham, where she's like hijacking multiple vehicles and doing diversions and escaping explosions.
I don't like this issue. I don't think it's particularly bad. I have no other thoughts on it. It exists.
Okay. Michael, any
What do
further?
you guys think of this? What do you guys think of this particular Catwoman costume?
I don't like it.
I like it. It's obviously very shapely. I mean, we went over this. You may not have been on the show yet.
What Catwoman suit isn't though? That's the thing.
Well, yeah, but I guess it's just the way that Ballant draws it. I guess it's less that less that the costume is shapely, and more that she is shapely. Ballant draws her body measurements quite exaggerated compared to, say, Joelle Jones or definitely Darwin Cook.
Well, I just would have to argue that. I mean, I've already stated my favorite Catwoman costume is the Darwin Cook one.
Yep.
And then my second is the gray animated series suit. Those are my two, and then like a third would be the Pfeiffer costume.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree with that. I think the Pfeiffer costume. I'm sure they did it at some point, probably in an adaptation or something. But I feel like the Pfeiffer costume would look terrible on the comic page, especially.
Tom King used it a couple times in those annuals where it could just be anything.
Okay, I'll have to go back to. I mean, also Art Germ on his cover run, he did like all the iconic costumes, but obviously his style is a lot closer to photorealism. So, and it's digital and there's lighting effects. But like, like if Jim Aparo were ever to try and draw the Michelle Pfeiffer costume, the Burton costume, I feel like that would look
terrible. I will say I prefer this version of the costume where she doesn't have the long hair out of it. I like the full cowl on it. Not a big fan of like the big poofy like 80s hair.
Yeah. I like her with a tail. I feel like
I was gonna say I'm actually not a big fan of the tail or the whiskers. I think it's a little overkill. Like, could she trip on that thing? Like, I don't know. She has it in year 1 also, and I think Long Halloween.
Black instead of purple, I'd like it more.
Would say so.
If this costume were black instead of purple, I'd like it more.
Oh, okay.
All right, so that's some costume talk, and to the middle issue.
Okay, same creative team, Ostrander and Balint. This one is called Misdirection, a little pun there. We start out in medias res with another splash page. This time, Catwoman's floundering around in the water because these incompetent goons just flooded the sewer. There's some humorous narration from her that's like, "The road was open," he said. "The way was clear. Easy, that's what he said. Really am gonna kill the bat." Like, oh, he said what? Yeah, that's kind of funny. And then we just go into a recap of the events of the previous issue, which takes 2 pages to recap the previous issue, which I feel like it might not be entirely necessary. Like if you're reading issue 73 of Catwoman, you've probably read 72. But anyway, moving on. Catwoman manages to find like a door out of the sewer, like a porthole sort of thing with a big wheel knob to open it, and she gestures for the goons to help her open it. They're all holding their breaths underwater, and they all get ejected from the sewer, and they can breathe again. And Catwoman's like, "Hey, you guys are idiots who nearly got us killed, but I need a job done, so why don't you guys work for me?" And they had just been bantering in the previous issue about which supervillains are better or worse to work for. And they all seemed, and they actually mentioned they would like to work for Catwoman sometime. I think the implication being like, "Oh yeah, she's an attractive woman. We'd like to work for her." Like that. But so yeah, she's got 3 new goons now, including this guy with long blonde hair who got them into the flood mess, who they call him Mookie, and there's a running joke about him liking to blow things up, and there's more running jokes about him later on. There's also kind of a running joke about him liking to cross-dress, I think. Like, it comes up that the next development is that they sneak into the hotel, and he's dressed as some countess or something, and later on he doubles for Catwoman and almost blows himself up. So, yep, got that interesting character in there. So now Catwoman and her goons go into this hotel incognito, and she lays out the plan for the goons, intercut with images of the characters she's talking about. They have to get to get the discs. They have to get past okay. They have to get past the security group, presumably hired by Bruce Wayne, I think. But yeah, they're called Hard Cases Inc. And they've got this shtick where like they all just wear black leather. They look like standard commando tactical guys, but they all have like a little bit of superpowers. Like they're nothing all that impressive, just enough that it enhances them a bit. Like it's kind of a plot point, and then in the next issue they'll discover that what's his name, Mookie, is like that too. And that's kind of a funny little development. Like, oh yeah, just a little bit of superpowers. Anyway, she then she sneaks into the building, and the commando guys can tell it's Catwoman, but they're like, "Oh, she's playing a game with us." Want to remark real quick that these little sequences with sneaking into the hotel in disguise and talking about the plan while showing what they're talking about, that stuff was kind of cool. I thought it was almost like something out of a Soderbergh movie, maybe. And that got me thinking, like, oh, what if Soderbergh or someone like him directed a Catwoman movie? That could be a fun, like, heist thriller sort of thing. But anyway, moving on. Then the other what are they called? The hard case guys. They're in a helicopter trying to stop Catwoman from stealing the discs. Her goon friends start fighting them. This action sequence with people jumping out of helicopters and uh, sniping off of buildings. And yeah, she uses Mookie as a decoy dressed as Catwoman, and he says "Booda boom boom" and like basically blows himself up. I think later on it turns out he survived because of his weird powers, and like it looks like the chest of his costume blows up. The implication being that he had explosives in his chest, which he was using to disguise as Catwoman. So that's a little um, cheesy, whatever. And it's also kind of funny that like they're like, oh, the other dudes chew her out for using him as a human decoy later, but she's like, oh, it's okay, he survived, but she doesn't seem to have known he had these powers beforehand, so she presumably was willing to just let him blow himself up. Um, anyway, she gets the discs, and I'm pretty sure. Yeah, she gets the discs, but then the hard case guys, they're like, oh, joke's on her. We switched the discs to the fake discs. Oh crap, these are the fake discs. She did get the real one. She switched them again. She really outsmarted us. We're gonna get her for that. And yep, that's the end of issue 2. Don't have much more to say other than the little observations I did make. I kind of alternated between liking and not liking the art here. Catwoman's proportions are definitely a little exaggerated for my taste. I liked some of the faces and the facial expressions, but then sometimes I didn't also. Um, there was also a bit of a gratuitous Catwoman in the bathtub shot. But some of the faces were kind of fun and expressive, and the action sequences were kind of fun. I thought maybe a little hard to follow, but I often find complicated sequences like that hard to follow. But yeah, maybe a bit of an improvement over the previous issue. I'm not really sure though. Yeah, maybe a bit of an improvement. Mostly just next step in the story. You guys have anything to say?
I hate this. It's bad. It's gratuitous. The faces are terrible. The art's somehow worse. It's terrible. It's the worst thing we've read on the show.
I think it's fine. I think in those first few pages, and this also goes back to the very end of the last one, like the sewage water is like straight up neon green, which is a weird coloring choice. I mean, I guess they don't necessarily want to color it like poop brown, but it's just like this is a fluorescent green. You pointed out the recap. I think is
What's
worth
in that water?
the recap is worth pointing out because that stood out to me too because in the entire rest of No Man's Land and all the Batman issues and stuff, I don't think we really get a ton of recap pages within arcs. Well, you'd have it within an arc. I don't think we really get those usually. So it's interesting. That kind of makes me think like, that's probably an Ostrander thing. He's from a earlier era of writing and maybe didn't adapt quite as like quickly as some of the other people from his era, like say like Kurt Busiek or Mark Waid or people like that who are still writing into the 90s. I don't have anything against a recap. I know, like, yeah, especially at this point, this is like 1999. Like, if you're reading Catwoman 73, you read 72, but can't always take that for granted. And I like the idea of recaps if they're not there, if they're contained, if it's like one page. And yeah, there's some, and again, this goes back to like some of my theories about Ostrander and then how he and Ballant were collaborating as opposed to Devin Grayson or other writers. Because Catwoman also makes a joke about her well-developed pair of lungs, which obviously that's 100% in the script, so that's Ostrander. This book knows that it's cheesecake. It's not like it's trying to hide it or embarrassed by it or anything. And Hard Cases Inc., as Mike was talking about Ostrander's, how a lot of his like books have that kind of vibe. they're total like wet work dorks, and their name makes me think of there's a Malibu superhero called Hardcase, and there's a New Universal book called Kickers Inc. And so Hardcases Inc. is just like a combination of two terrible comic books.
I mean, which is great because this is also a terrible comic book.
I mean, I don't actually like when you said that. I don't think I necessarily agree that this is the worst. I mean, I don't think I disagree that this is the worst material on an individual episode that we've read for the show so far. But also, as we've said before, in comparison to, say, our Clone Saga podcast, it's a much higher bar, even with these issues.
This is about on par with those issues.
I don't know about that. I mean, some of those,
on the high end of those issues, this is where that ranks.
Sure, but high end. I mean, you got to think back to some of that Spider-Man Unlimited and stuff like that.
Well, it's not as worse as that, but if this is the thing that I've hated the most while reading this, yeah, it's the worst thing we've read for me.
Yeah. Issue 74 to close out the arc. As Michael said, it turns out the Kooky Crook is impervious to explosives, and also they make him high. Really ridiculous. I'm almost certain this character never appears again, but we will see because we'll read just a few more issues of that one. And so Selena immediately puts the discs on eBay, basically. I mean, that's, she puts them up for auction online. And there's a weird thing where Bruce and Babs are talking about Catwoman, and like Bruce doesn't know that she's Selena. And they're like, because they're referencing some of Catwoman's status quo stuff from Manhattan, where Selena ran for New York City mayor and then had to fake assassinate herself and stuff. So Bruce seems to not know that Selena Kyle is Catwoman, or he's just like trying too hard and being weird about it around Babs. Not knowing the status quo, of this post-crisis / this era, could be either way. And the buyer, the high bidder, the buyer is Mercy Graves, who I don't think, or I'm 99% certain, as I know what's coming up, I don't think she's acknowledged by name anywhere in this arc.
She's not. I had no idea who this was.
But I'm pretty certain of Mercy Graves, assistant to Lex Luthor. And Hardcases wants it back, of course, as well. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Maxie Zeus is here, and he escaped to Manhattan as well following Cataclysm, and he's just totally inconsequential and he's just here to have a wacky villain show up. But it's pretty awesome when he shows up on this huge, ridiculous floating platform with like Greek columns and everything. And then Maxie Zeus just quickly folds like a bitch. Like he's literally just there for it to be wacky and to have more factors involved. And it was all a diversion, of course. So really, Maxie Zeus and Hardcases go at it, and with the other goons, while Selena meets with Mercy, who of course double crosses her with like a phosphorus trap, and then Hardcases catches up. Everything escalates. And this issue in this arc basically ends with Selena getting shot in the back and she slumps over into the river, while Mercy seems to have the discs perfectly fine and gets away. And the goons that were working for Catwoman are taken in to the police. So kind of unexpected and almost like, it's not like it's sad or tragic or anything like that, but Selena doesn't win in this arc. She doesn't get away. She doesn't really complete the mission, as the arc is titled. She kind of fails and also gets shot. So I'm not sure. As I said, I think there's one more episode of Catwoman stuff that we'll have, or maybe it'll be interlaced with other issues. I'm not certain. But if I were following Catwoman, I'd be slightly interested to see if those goons ever pop up again, if she helps them get out. Obviously, she has been shot, so that's a factor, and I'm sure those discs are coming back up again. What did you guys think about this and the arc in total, I suppose?
You already know my thoughts.
I thought this last issue, it was a little chaotic. I mean, everything ramped up. They hooked in Maxi Zeus, and so now there's like 5 parties all triangulating. But in that kind of sense, it's kind of a fun romp.
It reads like this wasn't edited. It just jumps all over the place. And it's like, well, Ostrander's coming on. I guess you better get that first script in fast. And like this could have been tightened up a lot. It's all over the place. The art is worse every issue. The panel layouts are worse every issue. It just degrades.
Well, balance gone. So even if we read more Catwoman, there's
The
no
art
balance. So
is
we'll
worse every issue. It doesn't make an improvement.
So that's that. Pretty much. The next episode, we're gonna jump over to Robin, and
Sure, we're on No Man's Volume 3 then.
pretty sure. I mean, as we've discussed, those books maybe not always perfect, but I think we're on Volume 3. And interestingly, especially if you follow this reading order, which we've opted for, that this Robin arc is going to involve a lot of action in the sewers, which wasn't like the focal point of these Catwoman issues, but there was some sewers action. So interesting to see the sewers getting used. And I forget. I think we knew like way back when they basically set up, like once Batgirl officially joined the Bat family, like they set up everyone's missions, and so we know Robin's. I think it has to do with finding out food rations or something. So that's next, and that's it for Catwoman for now. We'll come back to her later, and probably see her again in the main books. Thanks for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.